Her name is spoken only once in the entire Bible, and then never again. She was the only child of a judge of Israel, and she came out of her father's house dancing, with a tambourine in her hand, to welcome him home from war. She did not know that her father had made a vow. She did not know that her joy would be the very thing that fulfilled it. For nearly 3,000 years, this story has been read quickly and set aside quickly. Why has it been left out of so many sermons? In the hill country of Gilead, east of the Jordan, there lived a man named Jephthah. He was the son of Gilead, but his mother was a prostitute, and his father's other sons drove him out so that he would not share in the family inheritance. He fled to the land of Tob, far from the community that had rejected him. There, men without means and without standing gathered around him, and he became their leader. He learned to fight in exile. He learned to survive on the edge of his own people's memory. A man good enough to lead soldiers, but not good enough to sit at his brother's table. Was he ever meant to be a judge of Israel at all? When the Ammonites made war against Gilead, the very elders who had once cast him out came looking for him. They needed a commander, and pride gave way to necessity. They found him in Tob and asked him to lead them, and Jephthah agreed, but only on the condition that if the Lord gave him victory, he would remain their head afterward, not merely their soldier for hire. He first sent messengers to the king of Ammon, reasoning with him at length, laying out Israel's claim to the land according to the account preserved in the book of Judges. He reminded the king of 300 years of settled possession. The king would not listen. Diplomacy failed, and war was coming, and Jephthah knew it. Then, before the battle, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. It was in that same moment, Scripture says, that Jephthah made a vow. He said that whatever came out of the doors of his house to meet him when he returned in victory would belong to the Lord, and he would offer it up as a burnt offering. It was the vow of a desperate man, spoken aloud before God and before his own army, sealed before the outcome of the battle was even known. He had already been given the Spirit of the Lord for the task. Why add a vow on top of a promise God had not asked him to make? The battle went well. The Ammonites were subdued from Aroer all the way to the region of Minnith, 20 cities taken in a single campaign, and Jephthah turned home toward Mizpah a victor, the war behind him and his household ahead. And then his daughter came out. She came out first, before any servant, before any other member of his household, with tambourines and with dancing, the customary welcome a household gave its returning hero. She was his only child. He had no other son, no other daughter, no one else to carry his name forward into the next generation. When he saw her, Scripture says he tore his clothes and cried out that she had brought him very low, that she had become the cause of his great trouble. Her name is spoken only once, and then never again. He told her of the vow. He did not hide it from her, and he did not try to undo it in secret. And she did not run. She said that he should do to her according to what had gone out of his mouth, since the Lord had given him vengeance on his enemies, the Ammonites. She met his grief with a steadiness that the text never explains. She asked only for one thing in return: 2 months in the mountains with her companions, to weep for her virginity before it was over, before the life she had expected to live was closed off to her forever. Was there any part of this ending that she could still choose for herself? Her father let her go. For 2 months, she wandered the hills of Gilead with the young women who loved her. companions who left their own households behind to walk beside her through those weeks. The text does not tell us what they said to one another in that time, only that they went up into the mountains and wept together for what she would never have. When the 2 months were finished, she returned to her father on her own, by her own will, and he did to her as he had vowed. The book of Judges is careful here, almost reluctant, giving no detail of what that fulfillment actually looked like, only that it was done and that she had never known a man. Scripture does not say plainly that Jephthah killed her as a burnt sacrifice on an altar. Some readers across the centuries have argued that she was instead given over to lifelong service and permanent virginity before the Lord, since human sacrifice was strictly forbidden under the law of Moses. And a judge of Israel who kept that law should have known better than to break it. Others have read the plain words of the vow, the language of burnt offering, and concluded that he did exactly what he swore to do, whatever the law said. Where the text is silent on the details, it is more honest to say so plainly than to invent an answer either way. What we do know, without dispute, is what came after. Out of her story came a custom that outlasted the war itself. Judges records that from that time on, the daughters of Israel went out 4 days every year to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite. 4 days every single year for a woman whose own name was never recorded in the text that remembers her. Her father's name survived. The name of the enemy king survived. Even the name of the land survived. Hers did not. And yet the women of Israel refused to let her be forgotten, even without a name to attach to their grief, choosing instead to build a yearly ritual around the shape of her absence. This is likely why the story is so rarely taught from the front of a church. It resists a clean ending. There is no angel who stays the hand at the last moment, the way there was for Isaac on the mountain in the book of Genesis. There is no ram caught in a thicket. There is a vow spoken too quickly by a man still proving his worth to the people who had once thrown him away. A daughter who accepted a cost she never asked for and never agreed to. And a father who let his own word carry more weight than his own child's life. Many churches prefer stories with resolution, stories that land somewhere safe. This one offers grief and a custom of remembering, and very little else by way of comfort. But look again at what the daughter did with the 2 months she was given. She did not spend them pleading for her life, and she did not spend them in bitterness toward the father who had shaped her fate with a single sentence. She spent them in the company of others who loved her, out in the open hills, naming her sorrow honestly before it arrived, rather than pretending it away. There is something here about facing an unchosen ending with clear eyes instead of denial, about grieving in community rather than alone. Is that not its own kind of courage, even inside a story this hard to sit with? And look again at what the women of Israel did in the years that followed. They could have let her vanish into the silence the text itself seems to allow, one more casualty among many in the age of the judges. Instead, they built an annual observance around her, a ritual of memory that outlived every other detail of that particular war, longer than the memory of the cities Jephthah captured, longer than the memory of the king who refused to listen. 4 days a year, for generations, young women gathered in the hills to lament for someone the record barely names. That refusal to forget may be the truest response to a story like this one that Scripture offers us. Grief, offered honestly and kept faithfully year after year, becomes its own form of devotion. This story is not told so that fathers today should ever make rash vows, and it is certainly not told to excuse the one Jephthah made. Scripture records his vow without praising it anywhere in the text. Yet the New Testament book of Hebrews later remembers Jephthah among the heroes of faith, listed for his willingness to act under impossible pressure, not for the wisdom of his words or the cost he placed on someone else. The tension is left standing on purpose, unresolved, the way so much of real faith actually is. A flawed man used by God for the deliverance of his people, and a daughter caught inside a promise she never made and could not undo. Both things are true at once in this account, and the text refuses to soften the discomfort of holding them together. What this story ultimately reveals is that God's presence in Scripture is not limited only to the stories with tidy, comfortable endings. It sits inside the hardest ones too, in the 4 days of remembrance kept faithfully by women who had nothing at all to gain by keeping them, in a daughter's steady acceptance of what she could not undo, in a sacred text that refuses to smooth over what actually happened in that house in Mizpah. Faith, as this story shows it, is not the absence of unanswered questions. Sometimes faith is choosing to keep telling the story anyway, because it is still true, and because love found us first, long before any of us learned how to carry a promise well. Her name is spoken only once in the entire Bible, and then never again. But for 4 days every year, for generation after generation, the daughters of Israel went out into the hills and remembered her anyway, keeping alive what her own father's vow had taken from her. Some stories are forgotten because they are unimportant. This one was never that kind of story. It was only ever too heavy to carry lightly, and perhaps that is exactly why 3,000 years later, it still deserves to be heard.